Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about the Garrote. I very briefly mentioned the Garrote in my Mafia weapons video, but since it's a topic that I'm interested in and some of the weapons community is interested in, I decided to make a video going into a more in-depth look at the Garrote and some of its past uses. Okay, so what is a Garrote? A Garrote is usually a piece of cordage with a handle attached to each end, and simply put, it's used to strangle people. So the Garrote was originally an execution device where the condemned would be tied to a wooden stake, a looped rope would be placed around their neck, and then another stick would be placed in between the rope and the person's neck, and the stick would be twisted, and that would tighten the rope and basically strangle the person to death. Then later on it was changed and kind of used as a portable weapon. So if we're talking about a scenario where someone may need to use a Garrote for self-preservation, then here's a scenario that could be possible. If there's a person working for their government, operating overseas, doing surveillance, combat, or anything of that sort, in a country that isn't friendly, they may get into a situation where they need to use some type of Garrote. For example, a soldier is kidnapped or taken hostage at gunpoint and is stripped of his or her weapons. If there is an intelligence agent who's posing as a tourist but is actually doing surveillance and they get caught. In these two situations, if the person is under threat of being executed, he or she could make or use some sort of improvised Garrote to take out the people guarding them so that they can escape from where they're being held. So the first thing that comes to mind is their shoelaces. They could take off their shoelaces and have an improvised Garrote. They could possibly have a paracord bracelet that they could unravel and use. They could have some type of necklace or chain that they could take off and use, but all that is only possible if these items that I mentioned, like the shoelaces or bracelet, are not taken away, and if they are able to escape the restraints. Which in the case of being held hostage or while being interrogated, it's unlikely that they will still have all that stuff on them, but it isn't impossible. In the case of them not having some sort of improvised Garrote on their bodies, they would have to try and find some other ways to attack the hostage takers or soldiers and escape, whether it be using their bare hands or other nearby makeshift weapons that they can pick up. So that previous scenario was more focused on defense and escape, but the Garrote was mainly used as an offensive weapon by soldiers. So for example, maybe an agent wants to get into a heavily protected facility and there's soldiers all around. They need to remove the soldiers before they can actually get in, and they can silently do that using the Garrote, which is why people often refer to the Garrote as a sentry removal tool. A sentry in basic terms is usually just a soldier guarding over a place. The Garrote was issued in World War II to British SOE agents whose job was to conduct sabotage, espionage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe, and we know for a fact that they did use the Garrote to kill German soldiers. The Garrote that the SOE were issued would be a metal wire with two metal rings. It was a lot more concealable than having two wooden dowels, and the wire was a lot more resistant to breakage than having regular cordage. The British agents also had a watch with a retractable wire which would be used as a Garrote. Like the Garrote watch, the British had some very advanced weapons for clandestine warfare. American OSS agents also used the Garrote, and obviously they used it in a similar fashion to the British SOE agents. So staying on the topic of military and paramilitary in this case, if you watch the show Boardwalk Empire, there was a character on there named Owen Slater, and he actually killed someone in a bathroom using a Garrote, and that wasn't all fiction because Owen Slater was a member of the IRA. In the show, the fictional character, he was a member of the IRA, and the IRA did actually use Garrotes to kill people. Now let's go over more criminal use of the Garrote. The Garrote was used by Richard Kuklinski, who was a hitman. He claimed to have killed over 200 people, and the Garrote was also used by the Mafia hit squad Murder Inc. during the 1930s and 40s. And just in general, it was a Mafia favorite during the early 20th century. The Garrote was also used by thugs in India, mainly in the 17th and 18th century. They would take an approximately 3-foot long cloth, tie some coins to it to give it some weight, throw it around the person's neck, and strangle them. Another example of where we see the Garrote being used by criminals throughout history is what was called the Garroting Panic of 1862. So we see a lot of British newspaper articles that talk about gangs of 3 that would go around and rob people. So what they would do is they would have one lookout, one front man to distract the person, and the third guy, who they would call the nasty man, who would come around with a rope and tie it around the person's neck and kind of just hold on to the person, while the guy at the front man, he would demand for cash or valuables. Now in that case, it was used more as a robbery weapon and an intimidation weapon rather than for lethal use, but nonetheless it still could have become a lethal weapon. They could have killed a person if they didn't give up their valuables. And although it was called the Garrote Panic of 1862, it was common throughout the entire decade and probably before and after that. Another thing we see in the newspapers is sketches of something that they called the anti-garroting movement, where 2 guys would be walking back to back with sticks or some sort of weapon in their hand to defend against being garroted. Another thing that people also had to do is start hiring bodyguards to protect them so then they don't get garroted. I have one honorary mention, and that's the Hitman game series. It's where it's very common for Agent 47 to use a garrote as a silent killing weapon. So why was this weapon favored by military and criminals? So first off, it's lightweight. It's also very easy to conceal and hide because it's small. A cord is not considered a weapon, so technically it isn't illegal anywhere. It's very easy to make one. It's a silent weapon and it doesn't make noise like a gun, and it's very effective at doing what it's supposed to do. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I'm gonna do a part 2 very soon. I just have to get some stuff together so I could kind of show you a few different examples on the tabletop. So once I have that stuff, I'll actually make the part 2. But yeah, thanks for watching.